Welcome. Hello, all. Welcome to the March NCPEID APE Collaborative. We are so excited to have our speakers today. So, how our rundown for today's session will go for the first 30 minutes. We are going to have the motor team from, correct, right, Heidi, Rainbow Springs Preschool. All right, the motor team from Rainbow Springs Preschool is here to talk about how physical therapy, occupational therapy, adapted physical education collaborates from a motor team lens. Then the second 30 minutes, after that, you'll have an opportunity to ask any questions to the motor team. And then after that, we're going to divide into breakout rooms and we will chat about, it'll be kind of an open conversation about adapted physical education or any questions that your group wants to chat about. So we can kind of do that during the breakout room time. I will stop the Facebook Live and the recording, but then when we come back together, I will relaunch it again and I will summarize what one room talked about and Heidi will summarize what another room chatted about. So that will be, that'll be the agenda for today. So without further ado, I'll introduce our guests. And as usual, this collaborative will be, it's live right now on the NCPEID Facebook page. It'll be recorded for the NCPEID YouTube page in the future. We will also do this as a podcast episode of What's New in Adapted Physical Education. So I would really like to thank our motor team from Rainbow Springs Preschool. We have the APE teacher, Heidi Ambrosius. We have occupational therapist, Jennie Huh, and physical therapist, Dr. Emily. Oh, Emily, I forgot the
Concienne.
Concienne. Thank you. Oh, I was so close. But thank you all for joining us today. Heidi has some slides prepared, so I will let her go ahead and share the screen. Also, closed captions are enabled. If you would like to use them down below, you can do that within your Zoom setting. So thank you all for joining us today.
All right. Thank you so much, Melissa. We're very happy to be here. Even with our crazy busy schedules, today is our last day before spring break. And I was kind of like, why did we say we would do it that day? It's been a little crazy. But we actually all happen to be here today. So we are all in the same room, which makes it a little tricky with our audio. We have to make sure, that one of us is muted before the other one speaks. So we just have to make sure we're doing that. So if we accidentally step on each other a little bit, I apologize for the audio, but I'm going to go ahead and share our slides that we came up with. So I am the adapted PE specialist that is at our Rainbow Springs Preschool. We're not just going to talk about preschool. We'll talk a little bit about how we work as a motor team at the preschool level, and then we'll kind of talk about what it might look like at other sites in our district as well. But Jennie and myself are primarily here at our preschool, and lucky Emily, our PT, is kind of all over the district. But she is here a lot. So we do a lot of collaboration, and we are very blessed in the fact that we do have a centralized preschool program. So we see each other all the time, a lot. And we have this beautiful motor room that you can see that's behind me as well. So we're just going to kind of jump right in. We'll all kind of introduce ourselves so you know a little bit about us and who we are and kind of what our backgrounds and experiences. So I have been an APE specialist for 25 years, 21 years here at the preschool level. I do also still have an elementary site that I'm responsible for as well. I'm also at Cal State San Bernardino as an adjunct professor and the APE coordinator there right now. And I'm also currently the chair of our state council, our California State Council on Adapted PE. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Emily so she can introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. My name's Emily. I've been a physical therapist for 11 years. I started in the outpatient orthopedic setting with kind of everybody, mostly adolescents up through geriatrics. And then I found pediatrics and fell in love. So I switched into a pediatric setting where I worked as the clinical director in an outpatient pediatric setting. And now I'm here in the school where I treat kids preschool all the way to our adult transition kiddos who age out at 22.
All right, and Jennie?
Hi, I'm Jennie Huh, occupational therapist, and I've been mostly in pediatric therapy. So I started as in California Children's Services, CCS. I worked there, and then I took time off to have kids, and I started some part-time work and early intervention through IRC. That's 0 to 3 year program. And then I started working at Rainbow. And I've been here for a while. So that's my work experience.
All right, thanks, Jennie. I am very blessed that we all get to work together here. We wanted to just kind of touch a little bit on, we all kind of know this already, the importance of the motor team, especially in early intervention and at the preschool level. We know that early intervention makes a big difference with our students. And so we're big proponents here at our preschool for our students that do have a motor needs, especially that we are all involved in initial assessments when that is an area related to the student's disability. So often, especially in adapted PE, we see that that students who receive that early intervention, that as they grow and develop, then they might not need adapted PE by the time they're going to middle school, going to high school. And we've definitely seen the same with PT and OT, getting those early intervention in the gross motor, fine motor, and sensory motor skills is really important. So we focus a lot on that at the preschool level. And of course, we also know, just reiterating the legal aspect of it, that an evaluation must assess the child in every area related to their disability. And we know that in certain districts, they might not be including their APE specialist if there's a gross motor concern, or maybe they're not including their OT or their PT because those are related services. So we've kind of heard that reasoning, well, OT, PT can't be standalone, so they can't be on an initial assessment plan, which we all know is not true. So if those areas are related to the child's disability, then they should absolutely be on that initial assessment plan. Just a little bit more about specifics of APE on that slide. So one of the things that we do in our assessment team, and we can't always be at our assessment team meetings, especially Emily, she tried in the beginning. I'll give her that. She tried. Jennie and I try to go to those assessment team meetings as much as we can. And we will review the IFSPs of the students that are being referred to us. And we will look at what areas are needed as part of that referral process. So that you'll see that is an IFSP here that I screenshotted a while back to just show the different areas when a child is being referred. And we also look at the different areas that are specifically on the IFSP. So what have they been working on that IFSP? And of course, if that student has been receiving outside physical therapy or occupational therapy, then we know we definitely need to look at that as well. We also have come up with some child find search and serve questions that when a parent comes in and refers their own child, or if a teacher, a preschool teacher, like a Head Start or state preschool teacher is referring a child. So we do have questions there that are kind of red flags for our assessment team to look at, whether or not that student might require adapted PE, PT, and or OT assessment as part of their initial. So we know we have a lot of areas of overlap that we work in. And so, the adapted PE specialist is looking at those fundamental gross motor skills and any of those areas related to physical education and recess type activities. And then I'm going to let Emily talk about kind of what we look for when we might be considering a physical therapy assessment for an incoming preschooler.
Yes, thank you, Heidi. So the biggest thing we're looking at is accessibility with our physical therapy kiddos. So if a child has any sort of gross motor delay that is going to affect their ability to access the school, then that's when I would get called in. And in our preschool setting, that involves a lot of things that can be from sitting in a classroom chair to floor mobility during their circle time to accessing the playground and even assistance needed in the restroom. So just are they able to access all areas of the school environment?
All right. And Jenny, you want to talk about what we look at when we're looking at OT?
Yeah, so for OT, I look at fine motor and sensory, and I don't always look at these two areas all the time. So some children might come in and just have sensory needs, concerns. And so that's what I'll look at. I'll just look at sensory. And if parents have just fine motor, I'll look at that. And if they have both concerns, I'll look at both. But for fine motor, I look at their developmental level. So if and then also skills that they need to participate in in preschool activities. So just a lot of how they play with toys, how their grasp is with playing with things, are they engaged? Participation is a big piece. At this age, are they able to participate? And then for sensory, there are a lot of sensory systems that I look at, but main thing is there any sensory concerns that, can impact school participation? And so if there is, then I look at that further. But in a nutshell, those are the things that I look at for OT in the school setting.
All right. Thanks, Jenny. And thank you, Emily. As I was mentioning, it's very important at the preschool level when especially our students that have been on IFSPs, that we're looking at all of those areas of need. So I kind of showed you guys what some of what our forms look like. Our assessment process here is typically our school psychologist or our speech therapist, whoever is kind of the primary assessor and case manager on the assessment, will do an intake with the parents. And so there are questions on that intake form, as well as that search and serve form that you saw earlier, and those IFSP forms. So we do look at, are there any concerns with fine motor, gross motor, sensory processing, accessibility? Obviously, if a student is utilizing mobility equipment, then Emily's automatically put on there because we know that's her area. So if a student comes in and they're utilizing a walker or a gait trainer or a stander or something like that, then that's we know that one right there. We need to make sure that we include physical therapy on that initial assessment as well. We do highly encourage all of our motor team to be part of those assessment teams, so that if there are questions, if there are concerns in the motor areas, that we are addressing those as part of those initial assessments. So we kind of have trained our school psychologists, so to speak, but they know that they can always reach out to us when they're doing those intakes with those families, because sometimes things come up in those conversations that might not be apparent on the paperwork that we receive. And sometimes the paperwork we get's a little bit outdated too. So it's great that they have those conversations. And obviously, if a child has been receiving medically based OT or PT, then they look at those even more closely to see if that would have an impact educationally, and if those assessors need to be involved on the team as well. So we're really big on communicating with our assessment teams. I did also include just some things. We're very lucky in our state of California that we have our adapted PE guidelines in California schools. And it has some great information, even if you're from out of the state of California, that shows the differences between adapted PE, PT, and OT. And so I've screenshotted them here, and then you can find our guidelines on our state CAPERD website as well. And it just kind of outlines like, okay, what are the different things that we look at? What are we working on? And how do we overlap? So one of my favorite things about this is this little chart that shows all the areas that we overlap, because there is kind of some misconception out there in some school psychologists or administration that, well, if a student has gross motor concerns, we're only going to have the PT be part of that assessment plan, or only the adapted PE. Or if you know, we know that OTs do work on some gross motor, so we're only going to have the OT be part of that assessment plan. So making sure that we're really looking at the child in all their areas of need, because even though we overlap in a lot of areas, there's a lot of areas where we don't overlap, and we want to make sure that we're addressing all those needs of our students. So one of the other things that we do, in addition to providing those assessments, and one of the things that I should also mention is that we do a lot of assessments together. So if a student has on their assessment plan adapted PE, OT, and PT, or adapted PE and OT, or APE and PT, we try to do our assessments together at the same time. So we not only look at, you know, who needs to be on that assessment plan, but it's really important for us to observe each other during our different assessments. I love to observe the PT and the OT assessments because it gives me a lot of information on the motor function of that student, even though we're looking at different things. So oftentimes we do schedule those assessments together so that the parent will bring the child in, and I'll do part of the gross motor, Emily will do part of the gross motor, Jennie will do the fine motor and the sensory, or whatever the areas of need are for that particular student. And then we can also look at providing our services sometimes collaboratively as well. So we definitely know that that's part of being part of a motor team, that that sometimes we do collaborative models for providing services as well for different reasons and for different students. So collaboration sometimes can take place in the classroom. So pushing in different service providers, pushing into the classroom to provide those services. Or like here, like I said, we're very, very lucky that we have a motor room. So it makes it easier for us to provide collaborative services. So Jennie and I, especially, a lot of times we do sensory motor groups. So we're working on different sensory motor skills with the students. And then we do different stations. And so I set up stations that are balance, locomotor, eye-hand coordination, and then Jennie does more of the sensory motor and fine motor stations with those students. So we do sometimes provide services collaboratively as well. And that can also happen with APE and PT. We know there are a lot of PTs out there that will push into the physical education setting to provide their services, or just working collaboratively with the adapted PE specialist in how you're providing your different services and if there is overlap with that collaboration. So we do need to make sure that if we are providing services collaboratively, that we are making sure it's specified on the IEP that we're doing so. We have had issues in the past if we don't put it on the IEP that way, that there are people saying that the students aren't getting the services that are on their IEP because they're not getting those individual services. So like if Jennie and I are providing a structured sensory motor group, which we do for a lot of our students on the autism spectrum, where we do those very structured stations, we will delineate it on the IEP. And you can see that here, that it is a collaborative service with the occupational therapist for sensory motor groups. So we do that as well. But just make sure that if you are doing that, that you indicate that on the IEP. All right. This is just talking a little bit more about collaborative model. And Emily and I were just talking this morning about one of our students that has balance concerns and collaborating on a possible goal. Emily, do you want to talk a little bit about how we collaborate when we're looking at those gross motor goals?
Yeah, definitely. So most of the kiddos, especially in the preschool model that receive physical therapy services, also receive adapted PE. And so we need to make sure that we're collaborating, that if we are, we talk a lot about goals, like when we are writing a new goal for a student, like, okay, I'm going to work on this and you work on that. But then there's often also a lot of overlap. So the student in particular, we were talking about this morning, she has a lot of balance concerns. We were talking about how do we support this student in supported standing? And Heidi said, well, I really kind of to want her to work on maybe some kicking, maybe some balance beam. And I also would really love, I would like to see her like standing at a table. So, okay, let's write a goal where we can work on this together. And then Heidi might use the goal of the standing and the balancing on one foot in her motor group. And then I might then, when I pull her out for individual services, work on that same goal, but standing at a table and manipulating a toy. So we would both be on the goal in the IEP. We just might work on it a little bit differently when we pull the student. But because she's working on, you know, that skill for both of us, then we can do it together.
And Jennie, do you want to talk a little bit more about our motor groups and how we integrate different sensory strategies and fine and gross motor skills during those groups?
All right, so for our sensory motor group, we have it's very structured motor group. So we utilize the timer. We have visual icons that kids have to use to transition from one area to another, and we go like in a always like same way. So it's like a counterclockwise a way of moving in our room, and so children you know, are taught to learn that routine, and it really helps them kind of know what to expect. So and we provide different sensory motor activities. So for like I'll just kind of introduce the different stations. We have a ball pit. It's a really nice ball pit that Heidi's husband made for us. And it's so it's a ball pit, and we have a like a hoop and a target that kids are learning to throw. And then we have the swing. We have a platform swing. That's another station. And then another one is we have a like this is the gross motor station where kids are you know learning to catch, throw a ball, or they're doing the balance beam, working on balance and motion. And then we have the next station is we have the trampoline, we have a tunnel, and we have a like a roller coaster thing that they can choose from. So it's like 3 activities in one, and this one provides them with like the proprioception, like the jumping. They can crawl through the tunnel, and so they can do the roller coaster ride where we teach them how to push it up and then get on it. It's like a lot of motor planning as well in this station. And so that's our 4th. And then the 5th is our fine motor station. And this one, I switch it out. And we work on fine motor activities. We work on tactile activities as well. We have different sensory bins that kids can, you know, do the tactile, you know, exposure to different exploration to different materials. And so that's our 5th station. So we have 5 stations that children go through every time, and it's very structured, and we keep it kind of you know same structure. And this has worked really well for children that are starting out, especially children on the spectrum, autism spectrum, because it kind of, they know what to expect, and they learn to go through this, and it provides them with a lot of sensory input. It's very structured, meaning they're not allowed to just go and do whatever they want. And so it provides them with that structure that they like. And so it's been working really good. And we work, you know, together. The children, we usually pull kids 2 at a time if it's just Heidi and I. And so there's an adult with them at every station. And so it's a one-on-one kind of a situation in these motor groups.
And Heidi's in the motor lab now. So Heidi, if you wanted to duck.
I was going to
you
say, you can kind of see it's actually a virtual picture, but you can
Oh.
kind of see our swing back there, and there's the little roller coaster and our stairs and our ball pit. Yeah, it works really well for Jennie and I, especially for our little 3-year-olds that are on the autism spectrum, because we are working on a lot on participation. And this is a very structured way to get them to be able to work with us in those presented sensory, gross motor, and fine motor activities. And of course, a lot of it's preferred, so if we know that a student has the preference of the ball pit and it's difficult to get them out of the ball pit sometimes, we might make them work towards that and have that be their last station, or same with the swing, things like that. So it works really well for us, and it's a great way for Jennie and I to collaborate and work with our students on sensory, motor, and fine motor. So yeah, we're very lucky, and all that motor planning that takes place as well. So one of the other things we wanted to talk about is, we know we're very blessed. Oh, sorry. That's so loud. My apologies. We're very blessed here at Rainbow Springs that we are a centralized preschool. We know that we've all been itinerant, all three of us, and we know that there are a lot of other challenges working with your motor team when you are itinerant and you're not always at the same site. So Emily, you want to talk a little bit about this, because you're the one currently juggling the most sites?
Yeah, sure. I do have a lot of sites. As if you guys probably know, if you are already in the school or you work in school PT, that the kids tend to be a lot more dispersed throughout the district, just because it's a little bit more difficult to qualify for PT than it is for other services. So they tend to be kind of at lots of different sites. I do have a few like sites that I'm at the most often, where there's maybe a bigger group of kids, where I have like a mod severe class, but I am at a lot of different schools. So the biggest thing, I think the most important thing with making sure that their motor services collaborate is communication. Communication with the other people on the motor team, with the teacher, with everybody, is really the key to making sure that everything works appropriately. We try to schedule the different motor services so that the students aren't getting pulled from class too much during the same day, and also to give them a break. If they're a kid who need motor services, it might be too much for them to do APE and PT in the same day. And so I am making sure that I am communicating with the APE teacher at that site. Hey, if you're there on Tuesdays, then I will be there on Wednesdays, or whatever. And the same with the OT and everybody. So that's the biggest thing. We are blessed that we have so much technology nowadays. And so we can communicate a lot via Zoom, via email. I call the other APE teachers a lot, where we're talking on the phone. Hey, this kid's been working on this and they're doing great. Let's try this new skill. Or I'm going to be on vacation on Friday, so I'm going to come on Thursday instead, and just shifting our schedules around. So that communication is really the most important thing to making sure that we are getting the kids all the services that they need, and also that we're not overwhelming them by doing all the services on the same day, and so on and so forth. I also communicate with parents a lot. If a child is receiving my services, they generally are medically fragile, or they have a lot going on with them. So things change constantly. So communication with the parents is really key to make sure that we are giving them the services that they need, and that we're keeping up with all the changes that are happening with their health and their equipment and all the different things. So communication is really the key to making sure everything functions smoothly.
Thank you so much, Emily. Yeah, we're really lucky here at this site that we do see each other quite often, but Emily's often at other schools. So if we're collaborating on a student, or maybe we're doing an initial assessment, or if a lot with our transitions, so when our kiddos are going to TK or K, and we're looking at, okay, now that's a whole new world, right? As far as their gross motor skills. So we do collaborate quite a bit with all of that kind of stuff. So that is all we have as far as our slides. So if there are any questions or any discussion that wants to happen, we are here for that.
Yeah, this is Melissa Bittner again, and I'd love to start off with a question. And that is, so if you are collaborating on your services, how do you determine minutes then?
That's a great question. So if you're doing a collaborative service, sometimes you might want to think about, we want our service minutes we want our students to be able to meet their goals, right? Because we know that our goals drive their services. So if you are doing a collaborative service, you really need to think about, if you would offer a 20 or 30 minute session, do you feel like you need to maybe make that session a little bit longer because it is a collaborative session? So I have done collaborative sessions with OTs where we're both pushing into the class. And when we do that, we do typically make those sessions longer so that we have time to do sensory activities, the gross motor activities and then a fine motor activity usually kind of at the end. So sometimes that does need to happen. So it's definitely something that we need to be aware of and that we need to think about. Jennie and I typically, with our sensory motor groups, everything's kind of built into that 20 minutes. So for a lot of our preschoolers, that's as long as they can handle. It's 15 or 20 minutes. But as the students get older and as they can handle more service time, and if you are doing collaborative services, that is definitely something to keep in mind.
And then to follow up on that, my understanding is if you're doing collaborative services, you can't double count those minutes unless it is in the IEP that you can do that. So I think that's really imperative if you plan on doing a lot of collaboration, that it is written in the IEP for those collaborative minutes. Otherwise, you might have to make, the session a little bit longer and split your minutes if that's not in the IEP.
Absolutely. So Jennie and I used to run into this a lot because we used to work with, we don't have autism specific classes anymore on our campus. But when we did, we would work with the whole class and the whole class would come in our room and we're both working with them. And it's like, well, wait, okay, how can we count those minutes? And that's when it's like, yeah, you really need to delineate that on the IEP. If that is the way that you are providing that service, that is a collaborative model because. Can you please?
Joys of working at a school.
Yeah, I know. So yes, and we also make it very clear to the parents when we have that IEP meeting that it is being provided in a sensory motor group, that it's a collaborative model. And typically parents are love it because they see the benefits of it once we explain kind of how we run the groups and the benefit of that group. And then let's say, Jennie and I are working with the student and they're participating really well. And all of a sudden I'm like, okay, you know what? I think they could do more of a small group now, more of a typical pullout group versus the structured sensory motor group so that we can focus more on just the gross motor skills. Then we'll have that amendment IEP to change the service delivery model that is indicated on the IEP.
Great. Thanks, Heidi. Any other questions from the audience? All right. Jen, great question.
Yeah. So
Jen is asking, how do you keep the ball pit clean?
Yes, that is a great practical question. So one of the ways we keep the ball pit clean is that when our students come in to participate in our sensory motor groups, we do take off their shoes and socks, both for that sensory input on their feet and that proprioception, and also to help to keep our ball pit clean. The other thing about our ball pit is that pre-COVID, our ball pit was full of balls. It is no longer. When we first came back, Jennie will laugh because she remembers we had like 5 balls in there because we literally had to clean them every single time we had a student in and out of the ball pit. And so we take them out, put another however many in, and we were constantly cleaning. Over the last few years, we've added some. So now there's, I don't know how many are in there, but it's just kind of the bottom third, maybe that's balls in the ball pit. It's not full. And I actually prefer it that way because now I actually get in the ball pit with the students and there's room for me to do that because it's not full of balls. And so we just keep a really close eye. We do have a lot of students that like to mouth things, especially at this age. And so we keep a close eye on if they are mouthing the balls when they're in the ball pit, we'll make sure that we either spray the entire ball pit or we'll take out the balls that go in the mouth, those types of things. So those are kind of our strategies for keeping the ball pit clean. But yes, great question.
Yeah, I remember a tip from when I taught APE. We used to have a box and anything that got mouthed went in the box. And
yeah,
we have a sink.
We have a sink that's like right next to the ball pit. So that's kind of everything just goes in the sink. And then once we're done working with the students, we go and wash everything. Yeah.
Nice. That's very convenient.
It is nice.
They're also all like plastic hard balls.
So they like wipe down. They're not going to absorb anything. That helps too. That like you can spray them and they're clean. Yeah.
Also of note in the chat, someone asked earlier about the name of the document that explains the overlap between APE, physical therapy, and occupational therapy. And that's the California APE guidelines. We put this in the chat, but of course, if you just do a Google search, it will pop up on our CAPERD website, and it is on page 56, the nice little document that the motor team had there in their slides.
Yeah, it's very helpful. Emily and I came up with a statement for our reports, especially for our initial reports, because oftentimes parents coming in they've never heard of adapted PE before, and they don't understand the differences between the medical models of physical therapy and occupational therapy. And so Emily and I wrote a statement together that kind of describes it very briefly, the differences. And it gets tricky sometimes when we report at our IEPs, where we always have conversations. Should you go first or should I go first? Because some of the things we say are the same. And let's say a student is going to qualify for APE, but maybe they don't need PT. So sometimes I'll go first, like, okay, yes, they are getting a service related to gross motor, but they don't need physical therapy, educational physical therapy, things like that. So we do explain a lot of that to parents when they bring their children in for that initial assessment. And we do have that statement on our reports as well. That does kind of help with that too, because even administrators don't understand. And they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you guys explained the difference, because I don't know what you do versus what PT does, that kind of thing.
All right. Any other audience questions? Oh, we've got one from Jen. We're getting pushback that AP is only for students who have an orthopedic gross motor impairment, meaning that only students with PT should be receiving APE. So students with autism, etc., should not receive APE. Ooh, any suggestions?
Okay. Yeah, so Special Ed 101, any student that's eligible for special education and eligible for adapted PE can receive the service. It does not matter what their eligibility is, if they're those gross motor delays or even the participation delays related to autism are impacting their participation in physical education, then they absolutely are entitled to receive adapted PE services as well. So some education might need to happen with your administrators. NCPEID does a lot of advocacy in this area, providing different documents that basically explain that. Because there is a lot of misconception among special education administrators when they don't really understand all these different motor areas, especially if they're not understanding that, yes, a student can receive either one of those services or all of those services if required. In fact, adapted PE can be a standalone service. So that's even more important that they understand that, because they're kind of, the mindset that you just explained is kind of the opposite, right? That they have to be getting PT or OT in order to get APE. And it's like, well, no, they could get APE. APE can be the only service even if that student is not receiving any other special education services, they can receive those adapted PE services if they do require them. So it is important to have those conversations to kind of explain to administrators that we are all different in the ways that we look at a student's motor skills, and that adapted PE is a service just like any other service. So if a child requires it, then that should be provided.
And in the chat, I put the NCPEID guidance for administrators regarding APE service delivery. That is an excellent resource. It goes over, what is physical education? How do you demonstrate need for adapted PE? What age range? What disabilities? So exactly that question, Jen, that you mentioned there. This is the perfect document for you to give to your school administrators to further explain what APE is and how to demonstrate need for it.
Yeah, and I was just going to piggyback on what Heidi said. The students, who don't qualify for any other like special ed service, but still have extensive gross motor needs, we need to make sure that they're getting the services that they need, like perhaps a child with, spina bifida, like they're academically where they should be. But they have these extensive gross motor needs. Physical therapy is not a standalone service. And so if I'm saying all they need is physical therapy, they don't qualify at all. So the fact that they can qualify for APE allows our students to get the physical therapy they need and get the APE they need, which is important for our students with extensive orthopedic impairments and gross motor needs who might not otherwise qualify for special education. So I think it's really important the administrators understand that piece.
Great point there, Emily, that they can qualify through a 504 plan rather than through IDEA funding. Jen saying PT can be standalone here in Ohio.
We're starting to see it, but in the state of California, it's specifically listed as a related service. We've had issues with OT as well. We have a student right now that has speech and OT and APE, and he's exiting from APE, and speech is like, I'd kind of like to exit this student. And Jenny's over here going, oh my gosh, no, this student needs OT. So we kind of beg the speech therapist to keep them in for a little while, just to make sure they can still receive the services that they need. So we are starting to see it in other states. I think eventually that might change. But in our state, OT and PT are related services. And we as APE teachers will absolutely keep students as long as needed, especially if they do need PT and OT as well, to make sure that they get the support that they need.
Yeah, APE is a direct service, and we can be a standalone service. It's more rare, but it can happen.
Yeah, or like I like to say the primary service. So like with the students like Emily was talking about, we have a little girl right now that we're working with that has spina bifida that only has APE and PT. She doesn't have any other areas related to her disability right now. She's going to be assessed for OT because there are some concerns in that area, but she doesn't need anything. She doesn't need any specialized academic instruction. She doesn't need any speech therapy or anything like that right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm her case manager. That's fun. A lot of work, be case manager.
What further questions? Because I think we're running out on time to not do the breakout rooms, which is great. I love having this big group discussion anyway. So if you have questions, do them here. I'm seeing another one in the chat from Hannah, coming from a district with no APE at all and no PKPE. How much time does a student spend per week in APE and or motor groups? Just wondering how much dedicated motor time your students are getting weekly to get all of the growth and benefits.
Great question. So it breaks my heart to hear that, obviously. And if you need help advocating for that, we are here for you. Reach out to us, email us. I have a lot
Hannah, what state are you in?
I'm in Washington.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think Washington has a APE specific credential.
They're working on it though. They're working on it. They're working on it. They're one of those states that's, they're working hard right now to get that. So typically for my preschoolers, I will do 20-minute sessions, either 4 times a month. We write them monthly, which is basically weekly. Some of them are only twice a month. It really depends on what their needs are, what types of goals they have, how much service they need. Our little 3-year-olds, we lose their attention at about 15 minutes. You can see it. You just lose them. So typically we do about 20. And then when they're transitioning either to TK or K, then we'll look at increasing those to about 30 minutes a week. But I do a lot of collaboration with our preschool teachers too. They do a lot of movement. They do a lot of movement songs as part of their circle time. I really encourage them to work with their students during recess as well. So they're getting exposure to a lot of different gross motor skills, both in the classroom and at recess as well. And sometimes I even do push into the classrooms as well. So, service delivery models are dependent on the student. So if that works better for an incoming 3-year-old to have that support, their natural learning environment is going to be their classroom. So the classroom teacher, the classroom aides are there to help with behavior support. So if pushing into that classroom and providing the services that way is better for that student, then I'll provide that type of service delivery model that way as well. So again, depends on the student, but most students, it's about a 20-minute session at the preschool level.
And in the chat, I put the letter to Tymason which is a clarification from the U.S. Department of Education that APE services, if a child demonstrates need absolutely, for 3 to 5-year-olds at the preschool level, we should be providing APE services. So again, you're saying that, oh, there's no APE in your district. Someone needs to write a referral to get that process started. When the referral starts, that starts this whole process. And then services, even though general PE may not be giving preschool physical education, this child has, again, backed by federal law, the right to receive adapted PE services from 3 to 5 years of age. So somebody, please, it could be, anyone in that school, right? Get that referral letter started.
Yeah, that's one of the number one things that I always encourage is, especially with the amazing physical therapists that are out there, they try to fill those gaps in those districts that don't have APE. And I advocate, because those students do have a right to that service. And those letters are great. So yes, absolutely share. If you could have a favorite letter, that would probably be my favorite letter, because I'm such an advocate for preschool, and Garth knows that. So yeah, thank you, Melissa, for sharing that.
Any other questions from the audience? All right. Well, a huge thank you to Heidi, Emily, Jennie. You all did a fantastic job explaining how we can collaborate from a motor team perspective. Our next APE collaborative for NCPEID will be Tuesday, April 16th at 11 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Central, 2 p.m. Eastern. And we're going to have some APE gurus in the field. We have Dale Ulrich, Barry LeVay, Garth Tymason, 3 big hitters coming and just talking about like the past, the present, and the future of adapted physical education. So that will be a spicy conversation if you know those 3. Thank you all for joining us. We'll stop our recording now, but if you wanted to stick around and ask our panelists any further questions, they'll be around for a few more minutes. So thank you all so much for joining us today. Until next time.